For one night only. All the way from over there. Never again. That's what she said. That's funny. All the way from over there. Give me a drum roll, please. Our student, our speaker for tonight is. Her name's on the board. Alicia Gilbert.
I did something.
I need to say I'm talking about trusting God. Okay. The definition of trusting is showing or tending to have a belief in a person's honesty or sincerity, not suspicious. Once a ship was wrecked in a storm, there was only one survivor left. He was then washed up on a small island. He prayed day in and day out for God to send someone. No one came to his rescue. He then felt really bad that his prayer had not been answered and the fact that he was all alone. He started finding things around him to help him survive, and yet no one came to his help. Days passed, and one day, while he was scavenging for food, he returned to find what home he had built up in flames and everything he had. He was broken, stunned with grief and anger, and he let out a loud cry. Why, God, why? How could you let this happen to me? The next day, he was awakened to the sound of a ship. He could not believe that the ship came to his rescue. After boarding the ship, he asked the captain, "How did you know I was here?" And the response was, "I saw a smoke signal." He replied, "I didn't fire any smoke signals." The man understood that it was God. God answered his prayer in a different way. The moral is when things get really bad, it's easy to get discouraged when we shouldn't lose heart. We need to believe that God is always in the midst, and we should trust that God has our best need. In the book of Job, God allows Satan to test Job, counted 2 times. In chapter 1, Satan claims that Job is only faithful because he's blessed with his family and wealth. That's when Job takes his family and wealth. In chapter 2, Satan claims that Job only serves God because of his health. So Satan harms Job's health, and still yet Job does not curse God. He rebuked the friends of Job that incorrectly thought Job had sinned. God then blessed Job with more than he ever had. Even though Job was entirely clueless to what was going on, he continued trusting and keeping his faith. Jeremiah 29:11 ESV says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." God puts us to trials to test our faults, but even if we don't know why we are going through it, at all times we should keep our faith and trust in God.
She sent me that story to make sure there wasn't any blasphemies in or anything like that. And I read that, and that was such a good. I was like, ooh, y'all got it right? Yeah. I was like, ooh. I was captivated by the narrative. I was like, oh my goodness, everything's burned down. What's he gonna do? Oh, see. Yeah. See, if you can hoodwink me, oh, you're anointed. Yeah, if you can give me, oh yeah. Bless God. Thank you, Alicia. Hope that changes your life. I know some of your siblings receive a word from you, but if you would, see, we're gonna. Okay, I want to make you a little uncomfortable. If you have your Bibles, phone, whatever, stand with me. We'll be on churchy tonight. Wow! Stand for the Word of God. Open your Bibles, your cell phones, your hearts, your scrolls, your Palm Pilots, your pagers, however you roll, to Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5. I'm going to read, quite possibly, depends on how the Spirit leads me, the first 4 verses, and then I'll read a later version of the chapter that you don't have to turn to. Daniel chapter 5, as I switch to my slide. You there? You okay? Everybody say amen? You good? That's a nice looking suit. That looks good, man. Daniel chapter 5. See, your swag will distract me, so don't dress too nice because it'll throw me off. Chapter 5, follow along with me. I'm reading ESV, so if it sounds a little different, just stick with it. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the thousands. Belshazzar, notice the sequence of events. Okay, step 1. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, everybody say tasted. Tasted. When he tasted, why'd you say it like that? It was an authority. Tasted. When he tasted the wine, he commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and the lords and his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. The king and his lords and his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The last verse I'll read real quick is verse 30. That very night Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. You can sit down. Notice that it started out as a taste. He tasted the wine, and it led him on a cycle of events that ended up costing his life. In response to a taste of wine, he decided that he wanted more of the thing he's just tasted, even if it means desecrating the holy things of God. You realize that these things were used in the worship of God. They were in his tabernacle. These were holy, sacred things. They're not supposed to be used for anything but worshiping God. But he uses these things at his own party for his own purpose to worship his own gods, and it ends up where he ends up losing his whole life. I gotta give you a little context. Nebuchadnezzar was his father. Nebuchadnezzar was the first Babylonian king that ruled over the captives, the Israelites. They're in bondage under Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar was the first king. He brings these vessels that were used in worship. He brings these cups of gold and silver that were used in the house of God and stores them. But he never, ever, ever, ever would have defiled them by filling them with wine and drinking with them at a party, because he just knew you don't disrespect the God of the Israelites. Because he had enough instances where God smacked him around and beat some respect into him that he had this internal flinching mechanism that said, don't mess with the God Jehovah. Nebuchadnezzar was the king that said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if you don't bow to me, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace. But when he did, he saw at his very mouth, he said, I see that the Son of God is in the fire with them. In that moment, he knew that God is powerful, God is limitless. You can't mess with this God called Jehovah. He is the guy that when he said, I built this whole kingdom, look at my power, God struck him with instant insanity. He lived among the beasts. He ate grass like a cow. It said his nails grew out like talons and his hair was so long and matted, it looked like feathers. But then God, when he looked up, restored his mind. And in that moment, Nebuchadnezzar, when he's restored on his palace, on his throne, he says that this God, he exalts and he brings down. This God controls everything. This God puts lowly men on thrones because this God is the most powerful God of them all. He never quite gave his whole life to God, but he had enough experiences with this God to know you don't mess with this God. So Belshazzar is his son. You think he'd remember the stories, right? You think he'd remember the times that when his father disrespected this God fought back. You think he would have this reverence that his father had. Don't mess with the things that these Israelites call precious. Don't dabble with these things because God will show up and mess up your life. Daniel is the prophet. Daniel's the man of God. Daniel was the one that Nebuchadnezzar found advice from. 2 dreams that rocked Nebuchadnezzar's world. Daniel was the one that interpreted them and allowed Nebuchadnezzar to understand God's will and allow his kingdom to survive. Daniel was the advocate between these enslaved people and this king. He brought them blessings and peace and prosperity. Daniel got to rule in the enemy's kingdom. So you think Belshazzar would know, I should not do this. I should not disgrace these things. I should not defile these things, but he didn't. It seems like in a moment of passion, in a moment of hype, lost in the environment, he decides to throw everything to the wind and do things that he would not ordinarily do if he was sober. But notice it says that he took a taste, one taste. And when he took this taste, he was so compelled by what he tasted that he wanted more of it, even if it meant it defiled these things of God. I want more of it. I got to have all of it, even if it means it breaks and it shatters and it dirties and it tears apart the things of God that are surrounding me. And it ended up with his death. It's amazing what one taste can do to your life. One moment, one glance, one relationship, one compromise. You think, well, how would one taste, one instance, one failure, how would it shackle and change my whole life? It's amazing though what one taste can do. It can start a cycle where you begin to lose yourself. You become so emotionally, spiritually inebriated, that means drunk, where you don't know what is up and what is down. You don't know what right and wrong is anymore, and you've lost yourself in the weeds, and you don't know what happened to your life. How did I go wrong? How did I get addicted? How did I get all these insecurities? How did I get in this relationship? And you realize it started with just one taste. What one taste can do. See, we belittle the danger of just one compromise, one bad relationship, one bad moment. We see, well, God's grace is so abundant. God's grace is so overwhelming. See, I should have to worry about one moment. But God's abundant grace is not there to make you belittle the danger of one moment. God gives you abundant grace because he knows how dangerous one moment can be to your life. He knows that you need it because those one moments become so easy. Those one glances are so enticing. So he knows I had to surround you with grace because one moment can rock and change your whole life. It's one moment of not knowing why this is there, not knowing the compromises, not knowing what this will do to your life. One stroll, one like, one scroll, one text, one moment that starts a process where you don't even know where you are anymore. Samson was anointed. Samson, I just scared him so bad. I went, Samson! Samson was anointed. Samson was a Nazarite. Samson had a couple conditions to be anointed. Don't drink strong drinks, Samson. Don't cut your hair, Samson. And don't touch the dead things, Samson. You were put on this planet. Your mama shouldn't have had you. She was barren. You have a supernatural beginning because I want you to fight and free the Israelites from the Philistines. That is his purpose. But Samson finds one. Everybody say one. One Philistine woman that is beautiful and pleasing to his eyes. He decides, what will one of my enemy do to my life? I'll fight thousands of them. One can't mess me up that much. I want to marry this one. And so as he decides to walk down and meet this woman, one Philistine, one relationship, he's not realizing though that behind him is creeping a lion. See, it's amazing, the beauty, the temptation, the luring of just one moment. It won't change much. It won't compromise me that much. You never realize the danger that's lurking behind you, creeping up. You never realize what one trip down the wrong road, what one open window to the wrong things will allow to lurk up behind you. He fights this lion, tears it apart, and he goes down to meet this one woman for this one relationship. A few days later, he comes back. One trip past this lion. Remember, he can't touch dead things. This lion's dead. He could have went another route home, but he decided it won't do me much harm if I just walk past something I can't touch once. If I just stroll past, if I just look at it, if I just text it, if I just dabble in it one time, it won't mess up my life that much. And so he decides, I will walk past the thing that I should not have. He walks past and he sees that there's a honeycomb being birthed within the carcass of this lion. One time, in one moment of weakness, he sees the temptation of the honey. He's hungry, he's weak, and so he's so wrapped up in what he thinks this can give him. He's so wrapped up in the sweetness, in the pleasure, in the benefits. He's so wrapped up in the releasing that he no longer sees the death that surrounds it. He reaches in and he takes something out that will restore his strength in the moment. This releasing, doesn't realize though he's just defiled himself. See, it's amazing how when you get comfortable walking past it every day, looking at it every day on your phone, talking to it every day at school, it's amazing how comfortable you'll be with looking at the benefits of this temptation and forgetting the death that surrounds this temptation. And so you'll say, oh, one moment won't mess me up that much. I can just repent of it. And so he takes this honey and he eats it. It starts a cycle in his life where he's never going to be what God called him to be. One day he's going to end up with his hair cut off, his power gone, his eyes plucked out, his sight is gone. And he's sitting there lost. And he dies in the rubble with his enemy. Because see, one moment can rob you of your spiritual vision. You become so inebriated, so drunk on your own fears, your own desires, that you no longer feel. I've been there. You no longer feel right from wrong. You're just numb. And you don't know how to escape it. And you thought, I didn't know it would happen this fast. I thought it'd take a big thing to make me feel numbed to repentance, numb to conviction. But one taste got me so lost in the process that things began to die in my life. We always talk about how Samson had this comeback, right? Samson, his hair grew back. God gave me strength. He pushed over the pillars and they all died. Oh, you realize those are just embers of what he could have been. Just fragments of what he truly could have been. Samson never had to die in the rubble with his enemy. He never had to die spiritually blinded and his power stripped away. But one relationship, one taste, and one trip cost him everything. If you're not careful, one taste can rob you of your spiritual vision and all your power when it comes to your relationship with God. David thought, I'll only sit out this one war. He went to war. He's a hero, giant slayer. David said, only one war I'll sit out. I'll stay home one time. He stays home from one war, one time, walks up on the rooftop once and sees one woman bathing. What will one glance, what will one pause looking at her do to my life? I won't do anything. And then it starts a cycle where he takes her. He commits adultery with her. A child is conceived. And he calls her husband home, trying to get her husband to lay with her so they can look like it was actually her husband's child and not David's. But her husband says, I will not rest at home when my brothers are fighting. And so David is forced to murder her husband by putting him on the front lines intentionally to be slain. One glance caused the man after God's own heart to lose himself in this process. He didn't know where he went wrong, but now he's murdered somebody. Now he's committed adultery. It was just one glance, one moment. I only sat out of one prayer meeting, one service, one chance. I only missed one day. It's amazing, though, what one thing can do to your whole life. He lost himself in it. You know, we can judge David greatly. Well, he should have known. He should have stopped. He should have stopped right there. He could have looked, but he didn't have to kill the man. He didn't have to mess up his whole life. You know, that one moment really didn't settle it for David, right? To say that is to belittle the power of one moment and to overvalue the power of human will. Because I've been there and you've been there. How one moment, it's like a seed. If I allow this in my life, I can control it now. I determine what I look at, what I think, who I talk to. But once you determine that you're okay with this one seed being planted, what grows feels like it's out of your control. Now it's growing, you feel like you're a slave to your own passions, and you're getting so lost in the process, and you thought, I had the choice, but now it's been ripped from me. He got lost in the cycle. He got drunk on his own passions from one glance. Nathan, the man of God, shows up and says, David, I want to tell you a story about a man that had many flocks and a man that had one. The man that had one's lamb was so beautiful that the man that had many flocks decided that he wanted to steal the lamb from the one. And David interrupts and says, who is this man? I will kill this man. What injustice. He had all of this, yet he wanted what this one man had. And Nathan stops and says, David, you are that man. You had all this riches, all this power, all these wives, but you took that one man's wife. And David, awareness hits his life. Spiritual awareness, self-awareness rocks his world. He falls on his knees and begins to repent. He had no idea that this spiritual allegory applied to him. He's been so lost from one taste, one glance, one moment. Nathan tells him that because of this, the child that's conceived within her will die. And the sword, everybody say the sword. The sword is not, he didn't mean a literal sword, he meant an allegorical sword. It is a symbol. The sword will never depart from your house. You'll always be a man of war. Conflict will always surround you. The sword will never leave your house. You'll always be who you are. This is significant because God tells David one day, you cannot build my tabernacle. Your son Solomon is going to build it. I'm taking away this opportunity, this ministry, this relationship, this open door, because you're a man of war, a man of violence. You're a man of the sword. Because of the sin, because it was solidified who he was, and it began to shut the door to that option in his life. You don't realize, and I don't realize sometimes, What one moment, what one open door that should not have been open in my life will shut over here down the road. You don't realize that dating the wrong person can mess up the person that God has orchestrated into your life down the road. You don't realize what one moment can mess up down the road. When Samson took the honey and ate of it, he took it home to his parents. These parents that raised him and valued him, holy people, and he gave it to them and they ate of it. They didn't know that it was dirty. They didn't know that it was unclean. Samson's sin, his one moment, affected those around him. We forget that one moment of compromise, one taste, how it affects our relationships. Who could I have won? But I wasn't aware enough. How could I have preached? How could I have lived? How could I raise my kids? Who was I supposed to date but now I never will? What door is shut because I said one moment won't do that much damage, one taste won't do that much carnage in my life. Belshazzar doesn't understand the writing on the wall, the literal writing on the wall. The hand came down and wrote something, doesn't understand it. So he calls all the wise men, all the sorcerers, all the bippity-boppity-boo people, explaining what's happening, the literal writing on the wall. And his mother walks out and says, don't worry, I know a guy named Daniel that your father listened to. He interpreted dreams. He guided your father. Daniel was the one that helped your father understand this God, Jehovah's will in his life. It's amazing to me, though, that Belshazzar, the son, didn't know who Daniel was because Daniel was who his father Nebuchadnezzar stood by. He stood by this man. He depended on this man. He was protected by this man. And Belshazzar had no idea who it was. When Daniel comes into the throne room, Belshazzar says, oh, I heard of you. He begins to recount all the things his mother had told him about Daniel. I heard of you. It's amazing in Belshazzar's greatest moment of need to understand God. In his moment where things got out of hand, he needed protection. He didn't know who Daniel was and what his father stood by. As a younger generation, we quickly forget the things our forefathers stood by. We quickly forget the things of why they had those things there until we're already burned by the things they were trying to protect us from. So you don't know why that thing was there until after you get burned. You don't know why they prayed like that. You don't know why they had these, they look like foolish standards, but then you remove them and then you're lost because one taste led you astray. You don't know why it was there, what this prayer life was about, why they preached so hard, why they respected this and why they held on to this, why they were the way they were, until you stop being that way. Stop holding on to that. Stop standing by that. And then you find yourself lost and confused and fragmented and burned. It's amazing what one moment can make you forget. In his moment of greatest need, he had to depend upon something his father had already stood by. He forgot about him. Now, if we're not careful, our kids will say, I heard. Daniel, I heard of you. I heard about this thing called holiness that my grandmother lived by. I heard about prayer lives. I heard about oneness. I heard about speaking in tongues as being essential. I remember they used to teach that and believe that and baptize. But, I heard about it, but they forgot. Because we took of something. We tasted something. And so what will one taste do to us? And we don't feel it now, but our kids feel it later. I heard about that they didn't wear this and go to here, that they prayed and they gave God their whole life. I heard about it. I heard about the time they used to not be like everybody else. But I heard. And now it's just a vapor because one moment of compromise ruined it for everyone. I heard about this man. David did not know that that Nathan was talking about him. This allegory of the man taking the sheep, he had no idea. Belshazzar didn't know what the writing on the wall was until Daniel said, what it means is that God is telling you the days of your kingdom are numbered and you've been weighed in the balance and found wanting. What a heavy statement. Weighed in the balance and found wanting. You're going to die. It's amazing, though, that Belshazzar didn't know who he was, where he was, and what God was speaking to him. David didn't know who he was, where he was, and where God was, and what God was trying to speak to him. Until it took a man of God, a word, a moment, a prayer meeting, a youth service. It took a moment of intense spiritual power to allow them to have awareness of where I am and how far I've went. It snapped them out of their lethargicness. It snapped them out of the drunkenness that this cycle would cause. And they realized, I haven't prayed like I thought I was. I am more carnal than I thought I was. I'm not living like I thought I was. I'm not as devoted as I thought I was. I'm more comfortable with that. I've been walking past that every day and I'm not bothered by it anymore. I've been flirting with that idea every day and I'm not bothered by it anymore. What has happened to me? And then you wake up and realize, I didn't know I was becoming so comfortable with lions that are dead that I shouldn't touch. So comfortable with Bathsheba moments, so comfortable with this, so comfortable. I had no idea until God in a service gave me awareness through a word, through a man of God, through the outpouring of the Spirit in that moment. Because see, one taste can rob you of your whole spiritual vision. In that moment, they understood what was going on. This is in your Bible, but I've read these stories, and I was like, I can see this happening for sure. I really see this happening. David's child that was born out of sin died, okay? But God blessed David and gave him a son named Solomon. Solomon goes on to be the wisest man on the planet, the richest man on the planet. Solomon's blessed and loved of God. I can see young Solomon walking into David's study, this memorabilia room, whatever it looked like, and saying, hey, Dad, hey, what does this sling do? And his father says, well, that sling is used to kill giants. Okay. Dad, what does this staff do with the hook in it? Well, I used that when I was a shepherd's son. This is what a shepherd uses to protect his sheep. That when they don't understand why the fence is there, it's used to pull them back. When they think the wolf is their friend and not their enemy, it's there to fight them off. It's there as a token. It's there as a symbol, as a tool of spiritual sensitivity and awareness. Aren't you thankful for people in your life that help you be aware? You didn't know. Aren't you thankful for moments where you went, I know how I need to change. I would have been so lost if I had had that eureka moment. Aren't you thankful for parents and for youth events and for services that help you be aware of where you are and where you want to be? Aren't you thankful for awareness? Awareness, spiritual awareness, is the most precious gift you can have because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. You don't know how far and how much you're drowning until God allows you to see yourself for what it is. Because, the first person, the easiest person you can deceive is yourself. In those moments, a spiritual shepherd with a spiritual staff is able to protect you. When you're wanting to pet the wolf and the man, God says that's not for you to handle. He looks over though, young Solomon looks over and he sees a sword on the wall. And he asks his father, what's that sword used for? When he asks him, his father has a deja vu moment. His mind goes back to the moment when Nathan is calling out David for his sin. He tells him the sword will never depart from your house. You'll never build the temple of God because you're a bloody man, because violence will always be connected to you. Doors are being shut. Your child will die. Look what has happened to your life. The sword is a symbol of this moment in your life, David. And he snaps back to the present. He looks at his son, tells his son, I put that sword there to remind me, Solomon, what one taste can do to your life. I put that sword there to remind me every day what one moment, one glimpse, one stroll, one scroll, one like, one text, one moment of being alone. I put that there to remind me how out of hand it can get when I take one battle off. When I sit home one day to remind myself to never undervalue the temptation that one moment can bring. Okay, stand with me. A father and a son were having issues. The son was acting out. The father told his son, listen, if you keep disrespecting me and your mother, and you keep getting bad grades at school and getting in fights, I'm going to make you take a nail and a hammer and hit it against a fence post outside and leave that nail there. It'll be a symbol of what you've done. A symbol of one moment, one compromise, one failure. His son almost takes it as a challenge, like, okay. His son begins to act out and get lost. One moment breeds another, and he gets lost in becoming who he thought he wanted to be and show them who he really was. They don't understand me. They don't get that. They don't know them. They don't get me at all. But he begins to feel trapped by each moment. Nail after nail after nail after nail begin to fill this fence post. And he wants to stop now. He wants to stop acting out. But now he's got new friends. They expect him to always be this way. Now teachers forget that he was good once. Now they think he's always the kid that will cause trouble. Now he feels trapped because his parents are always ready for a fight. But yet he wants to change his stripes, but he's scarred them by how he's once acted. Now he wants to stop, but he feels so trapped by what one moment caused in his life. And the fence post is covered, littered in nails. He breaks down to his father and says, I want to change. And his father tells him, every time you do something right, every time you say you're sorry, every time you walk away from a fight, every time you get an A, I will allow you to go out and pull one nail out of that fence post. He begins to live better, act right, repent, grow, change. Begins to rip one nail out, one nail out, one nail out. And before you know it, the whole fence post is clean. He feels so proud. He feels new. He feels free. His father walks out with him and says, I'm so proud of you, son. Look what you've done. But he says, I want you to realize, though. He puts his arm around his son. The nails are gone, but look at all the holes that are left. See, one moment will litter your life with nails and failures. One moment can cycle out of control. But grace can remove those nails from your life. Grace can remove those nails from your relationship. But what grace will not remove are the holes they leave behind. See, you'll deal with the mistrust every day for the rest of your life. Can I trust myself with this phone? Can I trust my spouse? Can I trust my prayer life? Can I trust myself around this, around that? You'll always deal with the holes, the questions. Your faith will have a hard time being strong because you remember what it was like when you took one taste and it told you you'll never be good enough. You'll always deal with the insecurities and the doubts and the fears. Grace will say you're clean, but yet you'll always still feel the holes in your life. The nails are gone, but the holes remain. And so I just wanted to illustrate tonight that one moment can change your life. I'm just as guilty as you are. I look out for the biggies, but yet I'll have one moment every day. And I'll pray and I'll say, well, God, I removed the nail. But he's like, but there's a hole there. You'll feel that hole haunt you when you go to preach next time. You'll feel that hole haunt you when you go to lay hands on somebody and it says, remember that one time? The nail's gone, but the hole's still there. So real quick, I just want you to lift your hands and ask God to show you His grace and His spiritual awareness to protect us and help us to be all He wants us to be. You ready? God, we need you. God, we are faulty people.